Welcome to Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this episode of the show, we're breaking down the upcoming UFC Fight Night 79 event, which will take place in Seoul, South Korea on November 28th, and if you're in my time zone, you're getting up early because the prelims start at 5 a.m., the main card starts at 8 a.m., so double check your times. You don't want to miss out on anything like that, or, you don't want to miss out on the card. I'm going to forego my normal spiel about some major event because I am feeling a little bit under the weather, so my voice is dragging, and I will try to get through my 4 predictions as quickly as possible. We all know that's not going to happen. I'm coming off a 6-3 show at my last event. I started off with 3 straight losses, but ripped off 6 consecutive wins, including picking Neil Magny to upset Calvin Gastelum, so I'm pretty happy with that. And when I look back at my 3 losses, I'm really shocked with the opening fight, and I thought Valimir Lazaro did enough to win that decision. I thought Michael Prazeres did absolutely nothing in that fight. And I don't know how he got a split decision victory at that. So I was kind of robbed there. And then, of course, Scotty Jorgensen injured. That was a close fight. It could have gone either way up until he got injured. But nonetheless, I could have easily been 7-2 there. I think I should have been 7-2. Which was disappointing. My bet packs, I had a single bet on Magny encouraged in there, which produced my props were very strong, with the only one losing because Diego Sanchez is too tough for his own good and not going down inside the distance. Had Lazaro won, I would have added a lot more return overall, but it was a solid rebound show after a couple of slumping shows. Now, we have a pretty good fight card here, so make sure if you're interested in betting, and these cards, sometimes they're the best ones to bet on because the bookies don't have as good insight as, as they do in other cards because they don't know some of these fighters. So we've got to take a good look at this card and see what we can come up with from a betting perspective. I've got my 4 main card predictions. Oh, and sorry, the bet packs. $10 for the bet pack for this show. If you want to buy the remaining, I think there's 5 shows left in 2015. $5 or $40. So basically, you're getting one for free if you want to invest there. I certainly encourage you to do so. Hopefully, that last show is the start of a turnaround again, and we'll go on a strong drive to finish the year out. We get a little bit of a break after this card, and then we get into that three events in 3 days, which is going to be absolute madness. Nonetheless, let's get to my first prediction of the evening. The opening fight of the night takes place in the UFC's featherweight division as the Korean Superboy Ho Choi, with a record of 12 wins and 1 loss, takes on Ultimate Fighter alumni Sam Sicilia with a current record of 15 wins and 5 losses. Now, this fight was actually initially scheduled to take place way back at UFC 173. Choi pulled out with an injury, and he's actually been out of action for quite a while. We'll talk about that momentarily. Now, the first thing that can apply to all the North American fighters on this card is the time issue for North American fighters. This card is starting, as I already mentioned in the intro, very early in the morning. 5 a.m. for the prelims, 8 a.m. for the main card. That is going to impact their physical performance. I have a friend who grew up in North America, lived in Canada with where I live, and then has gone over and has lived the last number of years of his life in Korea. And every time he travels back and forth, he says it can take him up to 2 weeks to get normalized with the time change and getting your body back on the schedule or the place you're in. So unless some of these North American fighters head over there for 2-3 weeks in advance, it's going to impact them. And their body's not used to performing at that point in time. But let's talk about the fight nonetheless. Lots of hype surrounding Choi. 18-second knockout in his debut, but he hasn't fought in just over a year, so there could be a chance for ring rust. For Sicilia, he's finding his stride in the UFC, kind of finding that niche. He's won 2 in a row. And one thing he has done a lot, he's fought a lot in enemy territory. He's fought twice in Brazil with a 1-1 record. He's fought in Japan. He's fought in Sweden. He beat Godofredo Pepe in Brazil. He beat Akira Corassani in Sweden. So he knows what it's like to go into someone else's house and take them on and come out with a victory. Physically, Choi, 2 inches taller. He'll have a 3-inch reach advantage. He's also 5 years younger. Now, the Korean Superboy comes in with 9 wins by knockout. Pretty darn impressive. 1 submission win overall, and he's 2-1 when the fight goes the distance, with the only loss being a split decision. He has 5 first-round knockouts. For Sicilia, 8 wins by knockout, 4-3 in fights ending by submission, 3-1 in decisions, and he does have 1 loss by knockout against Hani Jason. He has 7 first-round KOs or TKOs. For Choi, he's a dynamic striker with absolutely dangerous power. Good footwork and head movement. He'll slip punches very effectively and really limit the damage he takes as a result. His distance management is very good. Attack and retreat to avoid taking damage. He's not a counter striker, though, for the most part. He's very aggressive. He'll slip punches and then he will come forward. He's not going to actually fluidly counter off the miss. Look for him to launch a straight left hook right combination. He did it in his fight against Puig. He landed it actually twice early on and then came with the straight right off the bat, which caught him off guard and scored the knockout. He also has some very nice jumping and stepping knees that he'll mix in when he finally opens up. He does have a tendency to carry his chin just a little bit high, and his grappling skills they've been tested, but maybe not to the extent that Sam Sicilia is probably going to test them. And the question is, how is he going to fare against an American wrestler? What I have seen when he's been tested with his takedown ability, he has a pretty good sprawl. He showed good balance against Ishida way back in the day. Ishida had him bouncing around on one foot a couple of times with the body lock all locked up and couldn't take him down. And eventually we saw Choi counter it. Ishida went for a shot, and Choi timed it, countered it, and landed a knee that ultimately put him out. For Sicilia, his striking, he's closing the gap in his strikes absorbed versus strikes landed. 2.7 strikes landed per minute versus 3.17. He's becoming more of a calculated striker. Still likes to brawl, but he's less of a careless brawler. Let's put it that way. He will still wing his punches. He will open up and be aggressive, and he can get tagged as a result. But he's starting to look a little bit more refined overall in his striking attack. Look for Sicilia to mix in a lead uppercut. When he knocked out Akira Khorasani, he landed a massive uppercut and followed up with a right hand to put him down. He has a hard body kick. He doesn't have the smoothest techniques with his kicking, but still it can be effective. When he fought Khorasani, he was having some issues with the distance and movement of Khorasani. He was coming up short with a lot of his punches before he eventually knocked him out. And that's something we'll have to watch here against a fighter who's a much more dangerous striker than Khorasani and also manages distance very well. When he fought Yatsi Meza in his last fight, he had a lot of success taking him down in the clinch. Against Aaron Phillips, he used his wrestling very nicely with 5 overall takedowns, and that could be his best option in this matchup. Ring rust could be an issue for the Korean Superboy. Also, the time away for a very young fighter can lead to leaps and bounds as far as improvement is concerned. We could see a vastly improved fighter from the last time because he's only 22. He's very young. This is kind of an odd fight time for Sicilia, and that could be very difficult. He needs to rely on his grappling. I don't know if he will. I think he might want to test himself on the feet, which will be a mistake. Choi's distance management and aggressive style will keep Sicilia backing up, shut down the wrestling, and my prediction is Do Ho Choi to defeat Sam Sicilia by knockout. Fight number 2 of the 4-fight main card takes place in the UFC's welterweight division as Sexyama, the Sex, Yoshihiro Akiyama, returns to action with a record of 14 wins, 5 losses, and 2 no contests, and he takes on Alberto, Soldier of God, Mina, with an undefeated, untarnished record of 11 wins and no losses. Akiyama, prolonged periods of inactivity. He's certainly closing in the end of his career, but he's still willing to fight. He's only had 3 fights since 2010, 30 months off before his last fight, 14 months off heading into this fight. But for Alberto Mina, he hasn't fought in 15 months since making his UFC debut, and he's only had 3 fights since 2010, so really both guys not very active. I would say this scenario favors Mina a little bit more because he is the younger fighter. Akiyama probably should stay a little more active later on so he doesn't slip in and out of conditioning. For Mina, 2 inches taller, 4-inch reach advantage, and he is 7 years younger than his opponent. Now, for the Sex, Judo black belt, very good. Sexyama, excellent grappler, 7 wins by submission. He's 5-2 in fights ending by knockout, and he's 2-2 in going the distance. For Mina, as I said, he's undefeated, 5 wins by knockout, 6 submission wins, 9 of his 11 victories have come in the first round. He is also a Judo and BJJ black belt, so very accomplished, accredited fighters here. For Akiyama, 2.55 takedowns at a 69% takedown completion rate. Against Amir Sadalo, he landed an early takedown, prolonged periods of top control. Not a ton of damage. He was more concerned about holding the position, which isn't the most exciting thing, but it's probably for a fighter who's looking to get back into things and kind of get that ring rust shaken off. That's probably not the worst thing in the world to do. He does on the feet lack big output numbers. 2.87 strikes absorbed per minute versus 2.87 strikes landed per minute compared to 3.51 strikes absorbed per minute. So he gets hit more often than he strikes. We go back to the Jake Shields fight, which is his debut at welterweight. He defended Shields' takedowns very nicely, but the unfortunate thing was he didn't capitalize on the feet, and Shields, not known for striking, got the better of him on the feet with his, was just busier, throwing body kicks, throwing punches, and got the decision because he was busier on the feet. We did see Akiyama in his last fight against Sadali. He hurt him with a left jab, swarmed him, but again, he had his most success. The most dominant portions of the fight were based on his grappling and his top control. For Alberto Mina, his fight, you should go back and watch it if you can. It was short and it was memorable. It was a nasty, sloppy brawl. When he fought Enzai, who's known for being a very hard-hitting individual himself, Mina was getting cracked early on. He was taken down. But eventually, and taking down, it was struggling a little bit. I thought he was losing the round, but eventually he landed a brutal uppercut to score the knockout. Some of the takeaways from that short period of action, landed not quite a full round. Mina was absolutely exhausted and very sloppy with his technique. If you go back to his final pre-UFC bout against Glenn Sparv, he did not look overly crisp with his technique. He did score the knockout, but again, it just wasn't. I've seen other fights where he just doesn't have that nice striking technique. He does a lot of unorthodox and ineffective maneuvers and attempts to get the fight to the mat or close the distance and attack his opponent. The other thing I didn't like the way Enzai was able to throw him. Enzai has good wrestling, but if he was able to throw Mina the way he was, I think Akiyama will have success there as well. For Akiyama, he traditionally doesn't have a great gas tank, but it might be good enough to get by. It was good enough to get by Amir, and it might be good enough to get by here, especially if he can work from top position. The big question about Mina was, he was exhausted in that first round, which was his debut. He kind of went for the finish. He got drawn into it. Is he going to be better this time around? He does have lots of first-round finishes, which suggests he's not used to going the distance or not used to longer grinding fights, which I think Akiyama will give him. Mina's aggressive style could serve as a nice counter for the low-output striking of Akiyama, but if he gasses out, Akiyama could easily grind out rounds 2 and 3 if Mina steals the opening round by just simply coming forward and throwing punches. The way I look at it here, Mina's technique is simply too sloppy and his gas tank is just not good enough, even against Yoshihiro. I think Akiyama puts him on the mat early, beats him up, gets the better of the striking exchanges as the fight progresses, and Mina slows down and becomes more predictable and loose with his defense. And my prediction is Yoshihiro Akiyama to defeat Alberto Mina by decision. We move now to the co-main event of the evening, and we've seen a lot of changes to this card. We lost an entire co-main event. This fight got moved up. Then we had Thiago Alves pull out. Jorge Masvidal left this fight, yada, yada, yada. It's been a mess, but we're looking forward to what we have now. We're in the welterweight divisions. The 7th-ranked Dong Kim, the stun gun, with a record of 20 wins, 3 losses, 1 draw, and 1 no contest, takes on Dominic Shonuff Waters with a record of 9 wins and 3 losses. Kim was originally pegged to face Jorge Masvidal when Thiago Alves pulled out. As I mentioned, Masvidal went up to fight in the main event. And Waters is stepping in on roughly 2 weeks' notice. It's probably worth noting that Waters debuted against George Sullivan on just about a week's notice, so he hasn't had a full camp for either of his UFC fights. For Kim, he's fighting at home for the first time since his first 2 pro bouts all the way back in 2004, almost 12 years ago. That's got to be big for him, and I'm sure he'll be excited. Physically, Kim, 1 inch taller. Waters, though, will have a 3-inch reach advantage, and the American is 8 years younger. Now, for Shonuff, 3 wins by knockout, 2 submission wins, and 4 decisions. All 3 of his losses have come on the scorecards. He has just 2 first-round finishes, and the last 4 wins overall in his career have come over opponents with a combined record of 51 wins and 47 losses. Kind of what you'd expect for a guy who's still fighting in the regional circuit, but not the most outstanding competition, but better than some. For Kim, 8 wins by knockout, 2 submission wins. He's 10-0 when going the distance, which is darn impressive. He does have 3 losses by knockout, though, and that is concerning. If you look at them, though, he got knocked out with a flying knee by Carlos Cano, which would have put down just about anybody. He had a muscle spasm, TKO, lost to Damian Maia, which was unfortunate, and Tyrone Woodley, who throws fire as well, took him out in his most recent defeat. Kim was a 4th dan black belt in judo, also a BJJ black belt, so a very accomplished grappler. For Waters, in his debut, he started actually very strong, landed some decent strikes, scored a takedown, hurt his opponent, but ultimately wound up on his back and getting smashed with ground and pound by a very big and strong George Sullivan. He struggled in the clinch in that matchup, which is something to take note of here with Dong Kim having a judo background. He was taken down a couple of times in close, ultimately landed 5 takedowns in that fight, but the problem was every time he took the fight to the mat, he ended up in the worst position eventually. He couldn't hold top position, either the fight got stood back up or he got put on his back. And again, his volume wasn't good enough. He landed a grand total of 13 significant strikes over the 3 rounds, compared to 54 from George Sullivan, which is not going to get the job done. He is very athletic, though. He doesn't use his reach as well as he could, but he is improving, and he can crack. He's got some pretty good striking, and his wrestling is pretty decent. But you look at the breakdown of this fight, he is facing some significant pre-fight issues. Short notice, he's fighting in enemy territory, the aforementioned time change, which I've already addressed. The cultural changes also can be an issue for guys, especially if you come over on short notice. You're not used to the surroundings. The food is different. It's difficult to just navigate, and it can really throw fighters off. We've seen that happen in Brazil with North American fighters coming down there. It could very well be a situation here. A lot of issues going on. Also, he's fighting a much better opponent than he fought in his debut. And, 2 weeks prepared, not a lot of time. For Dong Kim, when you look at this fighter, he has 2 drastically different styles that he likes to bring to the cage. One more recently we've seen, and one which was kind of the norm for the first chunk of his UFC career, which was the grinding, grappling-based fighter. Siar Bahadurzada, I always screw that name up, and Paulo Thiago got a front row seat to those. Both of them got ground and pound, really beaten up on the ground, just blanketed, and it wasn't exciting, but they were absolutely dominated by Kim. He then flipped a switch, said, I want to be an exciting, aggressive fighter, and he went for it, and he became a very reckless brawler. He knocked out John Hathaway in an exciting fight. He knocked out Eric Silva in an exciting fight. And then he got himself knocked out by Tyrone Woodley in a very short fight. One is more exciting than the other. It's also much riskier. And it'd be interesting. It always puts a fighter at risk. Especially, it's unfortunate when he has a skill set that can dominate a fighter, and he's opting to pull away from it. We saw a bit more of a combination of the two styles against Josh Burkman. He was aggressive, but he also used a little more clinch fighting and grappling, eventually submitted him. And that's something I look for here, to try and use that clinch fighting as much as possible. Now, I said he has been knocked out 3 times, twice legitimately, but he's been hurt in multiple fights, including that Burkman fight. When he opened up, he got cracked. Burkman had him on the run and eventually chose to clinch up with him, which was a mistake. But again, Kim's chin is a little bit susceptible. If he opts to go guns blazing versus Waters, it could work for him, but it could also leave him open to getting hurt, getting cracked, and possibly getting finished. Kim would be wise to use his grappling early on to control Waters, break him down, put the fear of the takedown in him when they are vertical, and tire him out. I would much rather see Kim use his aggressive style on the mat in conjunction with those grappling skills, put his opponent on the ground, and then start wailing the shit out of him and try and finish him there, as opposed to just spinning shit and doing all kinds of crazy attacks on the feet and trying to blast away and get that knockout. I have concerns that Kim's going to look to put on a good show when returning to fight in front of his home crowd for the first time in forever and get very careless with his defense, and it'll be exciting but extremely risky. Overall, though, Kim is far more tested and a far more accomplished fighter. He's fighting at home with a full camp. He has had a different opponent change, but I don't think it's going to be that big a deal. He still had the big prep time. And my prediction is Dong Kim to defeat... names escape me. Dominic Waters. I knew that. Dominic Waters I'm going to take Kim by decision, to be honest with you. We move now to the reconstructed main event of the evening as Benson Smooth Henderson, the former lightweight champion both in the WEC and the UFC, with a record of 22 wins and 5 losses, takes on Jorge Gamebred Masvidal with a record of 29 wins and 9 losses, the former Strikeforce title challenger. Now, Henderson was originally pegged to face Thiago Alves. Masvidal was taking on Dong Kim. The switch was made about 2 weeks ago, and this fight was originally actually set to happen way back in early 2015, not that far ago, long ago, but it was set to happen at lightweight. Now it's taking place at welterweight, as both guys have recently readjusted. They've recently gone to the new division. It's interesting to note they do have one common opponent of significance. Both fought Gilbert Melendez. Henderson retained the UFC title against the then incoming Strikeforce champion back in 2013, where Masvidal lost a decision back in 2011 when he was challenging in Strikeforce for the title. Both guys come in off wins in their UFC welterweight debuts. Physically, Masvidal is 2 inches taller than Benson, and he will have a 4-inch reach advantage. And keep in mind, when Masvidal in his UFC welterweight debut, he beat a middleweight who was coming down to welterweight, knocked him out in the first round, which is pretty darn impressive. For Jorge, 11 wins by knockout. He's 2-2 in fights ending by submission, and 16-6 when they go the distance. He has had issues coasting in close fights late, and that's cost him. That's probably why he has a few more decision losses, especially the Ali Aquinta fight, which was heartbreaking because I felt he should have easily won that matchup and should have got it regardless of his efforts, but he could have put the pressure on late and probably sealed it. For Henderson, 2-1 in fights ending by knockout, 10-2 in fights ending by submission, and 10-2 in fights going the distance. He's also known for close decisions, but more known for winning them and getting the nod in fights that maybe he shouldn't have, against Josh Thompson, against Gilbert Melendez, against Frankie Edgar. High-profile fights, he's picked up victories in all those scenarios. He is both a BJJ and Taekwondo black belt and a former NAIA wrestler, so a very accomplished fighter as well before he even entered the world of mixed martial arts. Now, the issue with Masvidal slowing down late and kind of coasting could have come from the weight cut, and there was kind of insinuated that maybe took too much out of him. He had to, be careful not to overextend himself. But, we'll see. We haven't seen him at welterweight go more than 3 rounds. That could still be the case here. Now, Masvidal prominently is a wrestle boxer. More of a boxer, but he's got very good wrestling. We'll talk about that momentarily. Good striking technique overall, and he has power, as I mentioned, a lot of knockouts. Averages 4.02 strikes landed per minute compared to 2.78 strikes absorbed. And you wouldn't know he'd be over 4 strikes per minute with the way he strikes, because it seems at times he's very calculated and refined, but not overly active. But he does put up some pretty big numbers. And he has, very good wrestling, both offensively and defensively. 2.36 takedowns at a 65% completion rate. So when he tries, every 2 attempts he tries, he's landing more than one of them, if you know what I mean. 82% takedown defense, very difficult to take down. Not impossible, but still very difficult. When we look at his welterweight debut, he did get taken down early by a very big Cesar Fajeda in that matchup, but he eventually got up. He stuffed the follow-up attempts and kind of got the groove there. He has good footwork and head movement overall. We didn't see as much against Fajeda. I wondered if the extra weight made him a little less light on his feet and bouncing around, which is traditionally his style. We'll see if it shows up here. He landed some short shots on the break, which ultimately led to the knockout. Only landed 12 significant strikes overall. Not a ton of volume in that matchup, which kind of concerned me. Maybe he was a little bit worried about being taken down by a guy who's quite a bit bigger than him coming into that. That shouldn't be as big an issue here. When he is at his best, he is extremely diverse when his striking is concerned. Good kicks, jumping knees, he'll throw a nice turning side kick, he'll throw a wheel kick. He rocked Iaquinta with a beautiful combination, flashing the left jab, coming with a right hook and then a straight left, and hurt him again with a big right hand. In the follow-up exchanges, he has back power. We keep talking about that. For Benson Henderson, the former champion, he has a big advantage in 5-round fights because he's fought so many of them. He's gone 5 rounds in his career 7 times. He's scheduled to go 5 rounds a couple other occasions, which they didn't, but he knows how to edge out close fights, and that's a skill and advantage that certainly favors him. Henderson, though, not an overwhelming volume striker, 2.89 strikes landed per minute versus 1.68 strikes absorbed. He has a good kicking game, hard low kicks, will go to the body as well, throws that front leg oblique kick very effectively. Look for him to double and triple up on his jab. He'll also jab to the body. He kind of leaps in with a right hook when he does, try to open up with a little bit more offense. But at times he has these prolonged periods of inactivity, which are certainly concerning. I really don't like, those prolonged periods because it gives his opponent a chance to be busier. When he fought Brandon Thatch, he had a lot of trouble closing the distance, which is not surprising considering how big Thatch is. But keep in mind, Masvidal, only a couple inches shorter than Thatch, will have the same reach. So there could be some issues there as well if Benson can't get inside. But, we'll have to wait and see. For Benson, in that fight, he adjusted very well, worked his grappling. Thatch is exceptionally weak on the mat. Henderson was able to exploit it, eventually submitting him. Masvidal, on the other hand, is not very weak on the ground. He's hard to take down. He's hard to keep down. And we have seen Benson Henderson out-grapple in fights against Rustam Khabilov in a fight he was on his way to losing before getting submission. He was having a ton of trouble with Josh Thompson on the mat, and he had a ton of trouble with Frankie Edgar as well, getting taken down, I think, 5 times, and I think it was the first championship fight. Big thing for Benson, he's fighting in front of family, which puts a lot of pressure on a fighter. This is the last fight on his UFC contract, and he's talking about testing the free agent waters, which can be concerning. It can be a distraction to fighters as well. This could turn out to be a chess match. It could be exciting. There could also be periods that aren't overly enjoyable because of the way these two fight. Overall, I like Masvidal. He's more diverse. He's the more active striker for the most part. It should be good enough. He should be good enough to keep Benson out of the grappling realm, and I think we could find success as for Masvidal with his own takedowns, and that could surprise some people. And he could, put Benson on his back where he can operate, but still you don't want to be taken down. Also, look for the power of Jorge to show up, especially if he clips Benson early. He did get knocked out by Rafael dos Anjos, a prediction I called. Thank you very much. I think Masvidal needs to be busier and avoid getting outworked, but I think we see him really open up at welterweight in this matchup. And my prediction is Jorge Masvidal to defeat Benson Henderson. I'll take Masvidal by decision, potentially close, potentially a split, but nonetheless, Masvidal by decision. So those were my 4 main card predictions for UFC Fight Night 79. I told you I'd keep them short, and I failed to live up to those expectations. I'm sorry. All of my preliminary predictions will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. Please check them out. Follow me on Twitter. We are posting Twitter tweets, I don't know what the heck they're called, as much as possible, and we'll do that. Also Facebook, like us on Facebook. I post everything there, so you'll get an update as soon as you see that I've posted one of my videos. I love that I got an email actually for the last, I got an email from one of my followers from after the last fight, said, your predictions suck, after I went 6-3, and I'm like, well, this is the best prediction show I've had in a month. Main event upset, a couple of tight pick'em fights, or close to the pick'em fights I got right. Lost one fight due to a bad decision, lost one fight to an injury. I'll take that almost any night in, the way I have been going recently. Nonetheless, let's continue that success. Check out my prelim predictions. Check out the panel's prelim predictions. Like us on Facebook. Tweet us on Twitter, whatever it's called. And as always, thank you for listening and take care, guys. Buy the bet packs, too. I'd appreciate that very much. I'm doing a lot of work there. And the DraftKings team, sorry, one more thing. I keep trying to leave, and I'm not letting myself leave. The DraftKings team I posted won me a nice chunk of change in one of the contests, the number 2 team. So if you're on DraftKings and you're playing, you can win some serious cash. You play my teams. Not always, but they certainly give you a chance to win. I break the fights down now. And if you are playing DraftKings, more information the better. Okay, I'm done now. Talk to you later, guys.